Welcome to Lesson 4, all about your audience. Remember in Lesson 3, we picked our audience. You might remember my subtitle of that is The Real First Question Ken Always Asks in Every Coaching Session. And that subtitle is absolutely real. My clients have known for years. First thing out of my mouth when we're talking about a presentation or a high stakes email, something that they really need to make an impression with, my first question is always, tell me about the audience, tell me what you know about the audience, because it drives everything. And obviously, picking your audience, that's only the start, right? We have to understand what makes them tick, and that brings us to this lesson. When your business is running full speed, you're probably going to have multiple audiences. You'll have the customers and the investors and the partners, and maybe you'll even have employees. What I promise you is this same handful of simple steps is going to be useful in creating the story for every one of these audiences that gives your idea the best chance to win. In Lesson 4, we're going to walk through simple, predictable steps to know what makes our audience do what they do. You'll sometimes hear me say that my goal in this section is to dissect the brain of the person I'm trying to persuade. I sort of hope that dissecting someone's brain doesn't sound too gross. I just want to remind myself we should not make assumptions about people if we want to persuade them. What we offer them is valuable. They need us. They also need to take some action to get what they want to get from us. They just don't know that yet. We're going to help them understand something so simple, so human. Doing what we need them to do is in their best interest. Doing what we need them to do will make their life better. We just need to connect the dots between what we offer and what they want. Our first step is pretty straightforward. We're back to list making. Let's make a simple list of our audience's desires. You have to get in someone's head a little bit to do this, so it will probably be a little harder than making the list of everything that made you special, that made your product special, that made your company special. That's your stuff. It's your head. So it's probably the easiest thing. What we're doing now is trying to get in someone else's head, so it's not as easy, but the good news is, again, it's just a simple list. There's no long writing, no careful wording, just a list of everything that matters to your audience. I encourage you to embrace the challenge of getting into your audience's head because I've got this secret for you. I actually love this part because what you're doing is remember I'm all about efficiency, right? You're doing two almost priceless things at one time. First is the obvious. Yes, you're creating a list that's going to save you time and make your story more effective. It's going to make your story more persuasive. But second, it is a staggeringly valuable exercise that will pay you dividends for months and years to come. Why? Because the more often you get yourself into the head of your audience, the better you become every single day. The desires of your audience, the desires of the people you need to influence, they become part of your instinct. So the first time you try this, sure, you're going to do the process exactly as I'm outlining. It's going to be manual and stepwise. But over time, your audience's needs become part of you. And when that happens, your ability to create persuasive stories that get people to do what you want, they become second nature. You'll find yourself able to connect your value to your audience's desires, even in conversations when you've had little or no time to prep. If that sounds a little far-fetched, why don't you just think about conversations you've had with your spouse or your coworker, maybe even your child. Something we've all heard, and I bet most of us have said, is a sentence that starts with, I know you're going to hate this, but. I know you're going to hate this, but. It means a person, you, saying the sentence, simultaneously know what you want to say, what you need to say, but you also know that the person who's listening, you know that person well enough to realize that person, that audience, is going to resist the next thing that comes out of your mouth. I know you're going to hate this, but. You've heard that, right? You've probably said it, right? All I'm saying is this. It isn't new for you. We think about what audiences care about all the time. Today, we're just learning to do it in a way that's conscious, that's part of a battle-tested approach that is pretty much guaranteed to make you more persuasive and improve your results. So let's get to it. We're going to do this together with a few different kinds of examples, all right? Let's start with what your audience would tell you that they care about, all right? And let's get the easy ones out of the way first. People almost always want to spend less money. That's easy. They almost always want higher quality. They almost always want faster delivery, okay? Those are the easy ones. Get those out of the way fast, right? Just put them on your list, you're done. Then think about all those discussions that you've had with your audience over time. What else did they say? Support, the need for support, that's kind of a classic. People often want to talk to or chat with someone to get help. Other examples could include ease of learning or maybe ease of daily use, efficiency of daily use. Back from my Apple days, we've always distinguished between ease of learning when something is new and ease of use is when something is efficient to use on a daily basis. Or maybe you're thinking about product safety, you're thinking of data safety, always about features and bells and whistles. These are all the things that might come up when you're talking to someone. Now, you've got to understand, this is a classic case of garbage in, garbage out. You've heard the phrase, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So don't just guess. If you've been in conversations with your audience, or better yet, if you've ever been in the role of the audience, you know this stuff. But if you don't know, just ask. We have some proven approaches on how and when to ask people that we can talk about another time if we work together. But for now, just be honest with yourself. Add things to the list, and if you find yourself unsure, talk to a few people. Listen hard. Be open to learning what they need. If those people are truly in the same audience, that is, remember, how do we know if two people are in the same audience? If they're in the same audience, they have the same problem, and they talk about that problem in a similar way, you're going to see those commonalities. Write them down. And if the desires seem confusing or even contradictory sometimes, you can bet there's something going on they aren't saying. When that happens, the next set of desires that we're going to talk about is even more important than usual. Okay, we've just listed our most important things that our audience would say they need, right? But what aren't they telling us? What are those kind of private desires that our customer or some other audience, they would only tell us after they've known us and maybe trusted us for months, maybe even years. For most people, even people who actually believe they're making rational, fact-based decisions, these private, unspoken desires are way more important. If we want to be persuasive, we've got to understand these needs. If we don't even think about these deeper hidden desires, there's no way that our story is going to talk to them. If we skip them in our story, we are forcing our great idea to try to survive with one arm tied behind its back. It's not fair to our idea, so it's not fair to us. So how do we get started? We ask ourselves some questions. What makes our audience's life better? What makes it worse? Some things might be directly applicable to your product, like losing weight or spending less time on boring tasks or looking smarter in the eyes of their coworkers or their friends. But some things will be really different. They'll be super general, like maybe they just want more job security, or they're desperate for a promotion. They want to become an influencer or a thought leader on the web, or just somehow they want to get their boss to stop micromanaging them and get off their back. Here's my promise. Once we start the first draft of our story, if your offering satisfies your audience's unspoken desires, these more subtle unspoken desires, that is going to be the lead in your story. To help, I'll give you some examples. For the first example, let's pretend you created an iPhone app that helps parents keep track of their child's belongings. So the parent uses it, keep track of their child's belongings. My wife has talked about making this app for years. Parents of the audience for that app, the app that keeps track of their kids' stuff, if parents of the audience, their open, spoken priorities are almost surely going to include things like this. They don't want to waste time buying items twice. They might want to save time on this trivial task of kind of stuff management. And it might be that the app can share information on the location of the kid's jacket or the backpack with the entire family. That's the kind of stuff they might tell you. Their unspoken priorities might get way more interesting, way more emotional. They might include wanting a child to learn responsibility. They might want to appear to friends like they're in control of that craziness that we all feel about their home life. Or maybe they're just craving a few quiet minutes of sanity every day instead of spending those minutes looking under piles of clothing looking for a lost softball glove. Those are the unspoken. The spoken, literal. The unspoken, the things that end up getting more emotional. Try this again with another example. Let's say you're trying to get a new customer to consider your personalized travel service. So the potential customer is your audience again. The spoken priorities for your customer are sure to include things like they want to save money, they want to stay at better properties. They might also say they want to try local restaurants. They might talk about new experience that they wouldn't be able to find on their own. These are specific things they would say to you, right? Then we start talking about the more general unspoken desires. That's when they take over. These are things they won't mention when you meet them, but if you ask, if you get in their heads, you can learn the things that are going to help them pick your travel service over another one. The unspoken desires could include things like raising their social profile by sharing highlights of the trip. They might be afraid to admit that seeing more isn't the goal. They really might be afraid to say they want a slower pace so they don't return home just exhausted because they now feel like they need a vacation from their vacation. Or maybe they've been burned in the past by bad deals or bad companies, and what they just really want is rock solid confidence, that nasty surprises from lost tickets to broken hotel air conditioning will somehow be prevented or just quickly and painlessly resolved. Let's do one more example. One big example, because we're going to circle back to our friends over at Simple Sprouts. Remember Simple Sprouts, right? This is this mythical seed company. They combine seeds and they soil and fertilizer. They put in little paper pods that are sort of like tea bags so that they're really easy to plant, right? Let's keep going with their story. So our friends at Simple Sprouts, they talked to some friends, they talked to family, they talked to early customers. They realized their most important customer, their most important audience was not the serious gardener. In fact, almost the opposite. They realized that their most important audience is actually the frustrated gardener, the gardener who's tried to grow so many things over so many years only to start the spring with high hopes and end in the summer and fall with brown, dead leaves and disappointment. They asked some of these frustrated gardeners, "What do you want?" And the results weren't terribly shocking in these spoken desires. The frustrated gardeners wanted seeds that would actually grow. They wanted a selection of plants. They even said they might be willing to pay a little bit more for the confidence that the plants would really grow, but not too much more. Each of these was an important desire. But our friends at Simple Sprouts, they knew there were unspoken desires too. So they started talking to people who sounded like they might fit with frustrated gardeners, but in a more casual setting, right? In other lessons, we'll talk about how to do this, but for now, assume they had enough casual conversations to get past those initial superficial spoken desires. And as usual, that's when the good stuff came out. It turns out these frustrated gardeners, they liked the idea of being a gardener way more than they actually liked gardening. Maybe you can relate. I actually know that I do relate to this. So their audience wants a garden, but they don't want to spend a lot of time there. But they do want to do something. And when they've tried this in the past, it hasn't worked very well. They think about gardening as connecting their children with nature. That's kind of different and new. They want to connect their children with how things grow. They love the idea of eating things that they grew at home so their kids learn that not all food comes from a grocery store wrapped in plastic. And this was a big one. When friends come over for barbecue, they really like showing off the garden. And in a fascinating twist, they loved having something, anything from the garden in the meal that they made for their friends. They only had this little spot of dirt. It's not like they want to grow a lot of food, right? The burger was certainly coming from the grocery store, and so was the potato salad. But just throwing on a few homegrown tomatoes or maybe a couple leaves of basil onto a salad, it just made the whole barbecue feel sort of homegrown. So they told our friends at Simple Sprouts that tiny homegrown addition just changed everything. It was a conversation starter, and it just made them feel better as homeowners, like more adult. As the conversation got deeper, something else became clear. Frustrated gardeners don't actually like getting their hands dirty. I know that sounds funny, and it's not like they're afraid of dirt, but the dirty part of gardening was the least fun part of gardening. And finally, they've been burned by these gardening gimmicks before, so they don't want to be burned again, right? They want confidence before plunking down their money. Deep down, these frustrated gardeners also knew they'd be willing to spend a fair amount for success, because in their head, they already spend a fair amount of money at the grocery store on the same things they'd like to grow at home. So they could easily tell themselves they were almost sort of saving money, but they didn't want to feel stupid. They didn't want to spend money on something that wasn't going to work. Whether we're talking about an iPhone app, travel service, or a seed business, or your business, creating this simple list of spoken and unspoken desires is a straightforward step that we need to deliver your persuasive story. I'm going to ask you to do just one last step for this all about your audience lesson, and then we're going to be done. You have one audience desire list, but you have two kinds of desires, right? The spoken desires and the unspoken desires. Go back and circle the most important ones. If you don't know, that's totally okay. But if you do, then everything we do next is going to be easier. And when you do this for yourself, this is a process you want to do, all right? Ideally, just let the cream rise to the top. Ideally, you're going to have a total of, say, 3 to 5 desires that rise to the top. Some are spoken, some are unspoken. 3 to 5 desires your audience cares about, obsesses over, maybe even fears a little bit, all right? 3 to 5 items that will become the stars for the next step in the next lesson, all right? For now, go ahead and just circle them, all right? Remember, we can always A/B test this in the future. In today's world, A/B testing has gotten so easy that sort of direct head-to-head testing of which version of your story works best, it ought to be part of your strategy anyway, all right? So let's just look at it for our friends at Simple Sprouts, all right? So for Simple Sprouts, it starts with the basics, that the seeds should grow. That's obviously a really big deal, right? The seeds need to grow. All right, so saving time and not getting dirty, those both kept coming up. And they're also a perfect match for what's special about seed sacks, right? So they make the list. And even though I wrote down eat and serve like they were separate things in my list, I realized they're really the same. And they're important, so we're going to circle that one. Finally, when something emotional keeps coming up, like connecting children with nature, you can bet that's going to be a motivator for at least some people. So I circled the top 5 desires of my frustrated gardener. Finally, I did one last thing. I double circled take less time because it seemed to come up as the most important reason, the most important driver, the most important desire for this busy, frustrated gardener. As usual, if you're not sure which one is most important, don't let it slow you down. You can always try your story with people. You're going to do that anyway and see what gets them most excited. But right now, we think this take less time, way less time, think that's going to be the most important. You'll notice that most of the top desires are in the unspoken group. I'm not saying that's always going to happen, but I promise that the unspoken desires are likely to have more emotional power over your audience. So if you can discover them, if you can discover those unspoken desires, and if you can satisfy them, you're almost always going to have a more powerful, persuasive story. And just like that, we are at the end of lesson 4. You've now got 2 parallel lists that are like gold. For a great Thanksgiving, you need turkey and stuffing. For apple pie, you need apples and crust. For a killer taco, you need a tortilla and a great filling. Now that I look at this, it's possible I was kind of hungry when I made this slide. But it doesn't matter. It's still right. For a persuasive story, you need exactly what you've got. A list of all the things that make your business special and all your audience's deepest desires. We are in such a powerful position right now. We know all the things that make our idea and our company really special. And we only need to do that once. And we also know about our audience, right? We know their deepest desires. And by the way, we only have to do that once per audience too. These are the treasures that we need to persuade people to do what we need to do in order for us to give them what we know they really want. This is what we need to improve our company and our reputation and the quality of our life. Having this treasure brings us to the end of this lesson. I hope you're excited to have everything you need in order to build your persuasive story. In the next lesson, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to connect the audience needs, the audience desires, to all the things that make us special, because that's going to inherently create a tailored story that's going to get them to do what we want and to get them to realize that your ideas are powerful and your ideas should win. We're on a roll. So let's keep going. Come on over to the next lesson. I'm already there. I'm looking forward to seeing you.